Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Jerred Moon. The Garage Gym Athlete Podcast is a result of my desire to build better humans, unequivocal coaches, and autonomous athletes. I've spent the last several years obsessing over program design, nutrition, and every other way you can optimize human performance. This podcast distills the latest scientific research with what I've learned and blends it with the not-so-scientific field of mental toughness. We are here to build you into a dangerously effective athlete. If you enjoy this podcast, you can find out more about our training at garagegymathlete.com. And if you want to pursue more into the field of coaching and programming, head to endof3fitness.com. Thanks for listening. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Jerred Moon here with Joe Courtney. What's up, Joe?
How's it going, Jerred? How was your week?
Pretty good. Busy, but that's a good thing, right?
Yeah. Most times. Yeah.
I mean, if it's good busy, right? There's busy with like meaningless tasks sucks, but busy with
that's just like hectic.
Yeah, hectic
like chores and like I still have all this work to do.
Yeah, that's always a lot. How's life for you?
I'm sick, so in a little bit of a training slump right now. Today might be the third day in a row I don't train just because sickness, and I just don't feel like dealing with it anymore. But at least I had that 2-month period where I only missed one day, so I know at least I had that, and I can do it again once I'm well again. Yeah, it sucks, but
Joe is showing up sick for everyone. That's how dedicated he is.
Took a bunch of drugs this morning. I just finished a cough drop.
Yeah, and he really didn't want me to record another solo cast. I was like, I'll just do a solo cast. He's like, absolutely not.
Well, I think I was speaking for the people. I don't think people just want to hear Jerred preaching to them for a while.
It's not preaching. It's thinking out loud.
Yeah, there it is.
Organized thinking.
Organized thinking.
So you're out, man. Like, are you going to be able to hit the 300? 3 days off? Like, is that going to push you over?
Yeah, I mean, I had I made up a lot of ground before. I was almost pretty much already caught up, and this is a couple days that I've lost. Yeah, and I'll have to do the math to see what it's going to be like. But again, I can just jump back on to do sevens each week, and I think I should still be able to make it. I'm not giving up.
Do you know how many training sessions you've done so far?
I can look it up if my sheet loads. I think I'm around 130, 125, 130-ish. Nope. Low 120s. 121, I think. Yeah.
121. And there's, as of recording this, 212 days left in the year.
Yeah, so
you got it.
We're 5 months in. So if I double the first 5 months to 10 months, that's 140 or 242. So that means I'll have about 60, basically 58 days in the last 2 months that I would have to get. But as we know, this first 5 months, at least the first month, was just awful. So I think I'm still fine. It'll just take some more sevens, but I'll still try and get it.
And how's life with an infant?
He's not bad. We're just researching nannies and stuff now, so that at least like 2 days a week, or some sort of daycare. At least like 2 days a week, we'll have a break. And Liz is going to be starting school soon. She'll be finishing up her maternity leave in a couple of weeks, and then school starts the very beginning of July for her. But he's fine. He usually just hangs out in the garage if we're working out until he just wants to eat. But we've been staggering our workouts anyway, so that I might watch him while she works out and vice versa. She's mostly taking the helm for everything though, so I won't take much credit.
Nice. Yeah. I shouldn't take much credit for the infant stage either. Much better when they can like walk,
Yeah, chasing. Even like middle of the night, like I can wake up and change a diaper, but I can't do anything about feeding. So
yeah.
All right, guess I'll just lay here.
I will roll over. Can you keep it down?
Yeah. Hurry up, kid.
All jokes, listeners. All right. Updates for me. I don't have a lot. got that Spartan race coming up. I've been sticking to the 300. I'm really just averaging 6 or 7 days a week. And that's all going well. I really want the Rogue Echo bike. And like, once I get
Wow.
something in my
Where'd that
head,
like
I just can't get it out of my head.
I
And
have the
so that,
fringe and I like it a lot. I've used the Rogue Echo a lot and I like the fringe as well though.
well, I don't even care that much about brand. I think I just mean Airdyne,
Yeah.
whether that would be an assault bike, the fringe one, or Rogue or whatever.
Did you recently use one that just like stirred the pot, or
No.
it's just
Um,
been a while since you had one?
yeah, because I mean, I have the Concept 2 bike, but it's just very different, especially for like low end or high intensity. And then I like the full body movement of an Airdyne. So I'm thinking about getting one, but I'll probably sell something if I get it. I've mentioned that because I just don't want, I need the space. So I'll probably sell the rower.
Hmm.
Yeah. So if anybody lives in like the Dallas Fort Worth area who's listening to the podcast, uh, you could email us. That's the best way. Best way to maybe
Yeah.
try and get in
Email your best
contact.
offer and I won't even push it through if it's a bad offer.
Yeah. And yeah, there we go. Just send us an email. I'm serious. If you live in the Dallas Fort Worth area, I'm not shipping anything anywhere. I'm also not delivering anything to anybody. But I would love for a garage gym athlete to use it. So if I get rid of the rower, uh, I'll give garage gym athlete $30 discount off of fair market value. So whatever that is, I haven't even looked at the. I think things aren't as crazy anymore, right? Because you can still
Not
you can
quite.
buy rowers and
And like people are going back to the actual gyms.
yeah. So, but that might be. I was thinking. I was like, I can't get rid of the ski erg. I use it quite a bit, but really, my brother uses it as his primary like conditioning piece
Mm-hmm.
because of all of his issues, and so I just couldn't do that to him. I do like having the treadmill for being able to run, if I can't run otherwise, and so I mean, it comes down to I'm really just not using the rower, but then I'll have like basically two bikes sitting next to each other, which will be
Yeah.
funny and hard to explain to the wife.
It's
Um,
like
no, they're different.
2 or 3 years from now, you're gonna be like, all right, I'm getting rid of the treadmill to get a rower again because I just missed the rower.
And this is the full evolution of buying programming or buying equipment. You got to keep it fresh, but I don't want to just keep adding. I think I want to get rid of stuff if I'm going to add new things. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah,
But
makes sense.
that's all updates from me. We can get into the study focused on our personal lives a little bit more because, to be honest, the study it has a really solid takeaway, especially when you look at all the literature, scientific research on this topic. But there's also not a ton to say. We can just kind of unpack it a little bit. So the study that we are going over is called "The Effect of Rest Interval Length on Upper Body and Lower Body Exercise in Resistance Trained Females." It was done in 2022. Now, this is a female-based study, but there's so many other studies that back this up. So I wouldn't even take this down to like a male or female. We're just talking kind of rest times in general and what they can do and what you should be thinking about. So the study really, so there are 14 women who had trained at least 2 times per week for at least 1 year that were in the study. And the protocol is fairly simple. Day one, they would do a chest press and leg press 10 rep max. And then the second day, they'd come back in. They'd do 4 sets of failure with 75% of a 10 rep max load on chest press with either 1 or 3 minutes rest between sets. Then they do 30 minutes rest. And then they do 4 sets to failure with a 10 rep max load on leg press with either a 1 or 3 minute rest between set. Blood lactate assessed immediately after each set. Let's see. And they basically did the exact same thing on day 3, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that was basically it. And then they were just trying to find out from a strength gain perspective, and not truly because the study wasn't long enough, but strength gain and hypertrophy were kind of the things that they wanted to answer here. But they are looking at total volume lifted because that normally equates to more strength, better hypertrophy, things like that. And I'll just let the cat out of the bag here. 3-minute rest condition outperformed the 1-minute rest condition when it comes to lifting in this case. And like I said, there are probably at least 10 other studies that back up that similar finding for rest interval condition. So what do you think about this, Joe?
So it kind of felt like, because the parameters of it kind of felt like a study that they made just so they could have a female-based study, because it's very small, very short, because only conducted over a 3-day period, or well, 3 total days, and so you can't really see any long-term strength benefits from it. Only 14 females. One thing that was kind of cool that I've never seen done before, which is interesting, were that the reps were done with the 2-second eccentric portion,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of interesting. I guess that would be more toward the to appease to the more, I guess, hypertrophy side of it. But this was looking at, like, in context, this was looking at strength and hypertrophy gains and then overall volume. So in that context, yes, the longer rest is going to be 100% better, because you're going to be able to do more volume, get more strength. I think it's the hypertrophy one that was the more of the question, because if you rest less, then you're probably your muscles aren't recovering as much, and therefore you're getting more fatigue and more burnout. And I know a lot of people have in the head of just like, okay, burn out your muscles, then they're going to get bigger because I'm just tearing them down more. So I think that was a good takeaway for this specifically. So really, you should be focusing on more volume if you want strength and hypertrophy. But there are times and places to do lifting sets with less rest, whether it's 1 minute or so, and that would be, maybe it's muscle endurance, maybe it's maintaining a higher heart rate, so like a zone 2 lifting, I like to say. So that yeah, that was the main thing, is that, yeah, strength, hypertrophy, if that's your goals, then however you can maximize your volume is best. But there are still reasons why, and even in our program, we will have shorter rests with lifting if we want some other sort of intent.
Yeah, and I do think, that was kind of one of my takeaways, is what you alluded to there was they are looking at strength and hypertrophy, and it's easy to think that that's kind of all that there is. It's either you're getting stronger, you're adding more weight on the bar, or you're trying to gain muscle. Those are the only two things that could ever possibly happen in someone's goals for strength training. And while I think that hits on most people's goals, in all honesty, it doesn't actually go through the strength continuum. So the strength continuum would be like strength, like pure strength, and then it would be strength speed. And so strength speed is lifting a moderate load more quickly. So you could think of like a clean and jerk, something like that. And then it would be speed strength, which is a lot more like a lighter load moved explosively. Think about like a wall ball shot, a kettlebell swing, something like that. And then the last area in the strength continuum would be pure speed. And so that could be sprinting for duration, or it could even, you can view it as like a plyometric movement, or box jump or something like that, or bounding, anything like that. So that is what I think it doesn't take into account in the performance continuum, because some of those things require either a lot more rest than this or a lot less rest than this, and so those are things that you have to factor in with what your goals are. But if your goal is just strength and hypertrophy, it does seem that this 3-minute mark is kind of a, let's just say, a great rule of thumb for most people. If you like wonder how long should I rest, but we also covered some studies about
Self-regulated rest.
yeah, self-regulated rest, and that seems to be like just as effective, if not more effective. And I really think that if you have been training for a long time, you can probably gauge whether or not you're ready to go again or not, because the people in this study specifically weren't like, just killing it on the athlete side of things, right? Like the parameters for being allowed in the study were relatively low. It's like, have you trained twice a week for at least a year? That's nothing crazy. But it is something, at least they had been training. It wasn't untrained people. So I think that if you are fairly trained, try some self-selected rest and see how you go, because resting as long as you possibly can, I think, helps a lot with strength. But I don't feel like hypertrophy needs this full recovery unless you're just resting too less. And so I don't think that there's magic in the numbers, like 1 minute versus 3 minute. I think they're just finding some commonalities, so we could sit around as a coach, or they can write a textbook and be like, yeah, rest 3 minutes, it's optimal. But if I have you doing for hypertrophy, a barbell bicep curl, and I say, I want you to do 12 reps, but I need the load to be heavy. It's kind of like the 10, not 11 strength test. Like I need you to be able to do 12 reps on this barbell bicep curl, but not 15. Like I don't want you to be like this to be so easy. And that's the best way, I think, to prescribe hypertrophy type lifting. Now, if you do that and you rest for 60 seconds in your second set, you can't get 12 reps at that load, you didn't rest long enough. That would be a huge determining factor. And all I'm trying to do right now is like help guide an athlete through being able to do self-selected rest better. So if you couldn't do those 12 reps on the second set and you had only rested for 45 to 60 seconds, you didn't rest long enough. And then if 2 minutes still didn't get you there, you probably didn't rest long enough. Now, I think the inverse is true. If you do 12, it's really hard. You think there's no way you could have done 15, and then you rest for 90 seconds. You do your second set, and you are able to do those 12 reps again, and it's also really challenging. Then I think that you're getting the maximum benefit there. And that's all that you really need to be able to pay attention to is, are you able to perform that set? And now when we move over to strength training, it's super obvious, because if you're lifting heavy weight and it's like a moderate load, more rest is always going to be better. But then you have to just take into the reality of how much time do you have to train. I remember when we were doing BCT, there was some day where it was like, I think it was just like 10 sets of 3 or something like that. But the loads were increasing. And I think it took me an hour to do 30 reps because the weights were so heavy that I was resting like, I don't even know. It was kind of like a self-selected rest. Like I would just kind of sit around until I felt like, okay, I think I can do that again, because it was so heavy. I think it was like 90 or 95 or something stupid, and you do that 1 or 2 sets, it's fine. But you get into like your 6th or 7th set and you're like, oh, damn, this is hard. And so that's just something to keep in mind. Like I've done that, and if self-selected rest can get a little bit crazy. And then there was still more stuff I was supposed to do in that training session. I think I just ended up not doing it because I was like, I ran out of time, like whatever. So you just need to pay attention to those things and be mindful of your actual training schedule. But yeah, if you need kind of a rule of thumb other than like self-select and go by feel, 3 minutes seems to be a nice magical number backed up by science, not just in this study, but like I said, at least 10 other studies that I'm aware of that think that is a good rest interval.
Yeah, I think for the most part, no matter what strength sets we do, I right when I finish whatever the previous set was, I look at my watch, and then I did that time plus 2. So I just, whatever it is, I take 2 minutes as my starting point of what am I going to rest at. And if it's something that was a little bit easier, maybe it's like press day, I might be stepping up to the bar again at 2 minutes. Or if it's, squats, something heavier, more taxing, I might be making my way to the bar at 2 minutes, and I might be getting on it at like 2:30 or so. So it depends on what it is, how heavy it is, what sort of effort. But typically I start at 2 minutes, and then depending on how I'm feeling that day and what the lift is how I determine the exact rest that I do. And it changes in between sets too. So the first 2 sets I might take longer rest, but then I might get into a groove and I might be able to go faster after that.
And this one question that this just kind of opens for me, and maybe a future study, or maybe just food for thought for everybody listening. But when it comes to endurance athletes, what would separate someone who's better, fitter versus, let's just say, less fit? Could be their ability to buffer lactate. Means their body can deal with it better, process it better, reuse it better than someone who is untrained. And that's just a statement of fact. And the better you are at buffering the lactate, it's going to appear that you're fitter, right? Because you're not running into the same level of pain at the same power output as someone who's less fit than you. But there might be a little bit of genetics that play into that, but how you really get there is through training, like a lot of zone 2 training, becoming more efficient in your aerobic base, and you're able to withstand these greater training loads, volume, higher power output for longer periods of time in a lower heart rate zone. That just means your fitness is improving, right? But you have to train that through like a lot of low end aerobic conditioning. Now, moving to the strength side, I wonder if some people are just better at the recovery process than other people, and it doesn't really have so much to do with um a specific amount of time. It's just how fit are you, because I think if you like let's take one man one barbell. People have gotten plenty strong on one man one barbell, and we have the bulk of the program's volume are EMOMs. So like you're only resting for like 45 to 50 seconds in between for like 10 sets, like that's very little rest periods, and the program's still very effective. But what I think one man one barbell would does for an individual is, like, say week one, that was like a 10-minute EMOM's like the worst possible thing you could imagine. It's just like painful. But your second cycle, week one, it's not that bad. You're like, oh, this isn't that bad. And I think you're fitter. Your muscles are just able to, similar to endurance, like better able to, process and utilize lactate and buffer that lactate and all these things. And so you're just fitter, right? You're just becoming a better athlete. So how do we train that? Well, in aerobic, if you want to go higher power, harder, longer, whatever, you have to do a lot of this zone 2 training to be able to do that. It's not just always trying as hard as you can all the time. You need to increase your aerobic base through a lot of zone 2 training. And strength training, we don't have as much of an answer for that. But is it a lot of muscular endurance training with lower rep periods to make your body better at recovery within strength training? So when you get to harder, heavier sets, more volume, you're able to rest less. I don't know the answer to that question, but I wanted to throw it out there because I think that that's how the body would work. It makes sense in the aerobic world, endurance world. To me, it would make a lot of sense in the strength training world as well. So I think if you want to be able to rest less, you need to train with less rest, and do a lot more volume.
Yeah,
Very similar to an aerobic base in training.
I know that if it's been a really long time since I've done like EMOM squats, the first time I do it, that first day is awful. Like there's times where halfway through it, I'm getting sore and like my hamstrings are already getting tight and sore because it's just not used to that amount of lifting with that short of rest. But then by the next week, it's like, okay, I'm fine through the whole set. It's just like that initial adjustment is always fun.
Yeah, it's rough. I'm not gonna lie. Every time I've come back to one man one barbell in the past, it's like, wow, this is a lot of volume.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on this one?
Nope. I think we're got a lot out of it.
All right, cool. Let's get into the book. The book we covered for this month is Black Box Thinking: Why Most People Never Learn from Their Mistakes by Matthew Syed. Don't worry, I looked it up before I said it out loud. So Black Box Thinking, if I had to give my own recap and synopsis, it's just embracing failure and mistakes and learning from them and, moving forward. And it's a lot of what we all, I think, know, but we don't all practice to the best of our ability. So let's talk about it, Joe. What did you think about this book?
I liked a lot of it. I like a lot of stories, and I know there's a lot of times we get into these books and they're very hyper focused on like one point, and after a while, it seems like that point just gets beaten to you ad nauseum. It's like, okay, we get the point you're going to, and like to a certain extent, it gets that way. But I think all of the ideas and different ways you look at, he was examining failure and how other industries have looked at failure was really interesting, and then comparing those industries as to this one's embraced failure, like the airline companies. They embrace failure versus the medical community. They shunted and dismissed failure. They just didn't want to address it because they didn't want the headaches, the private problems, whatever. So I think that's it was cool to see. It was interesting how it was told. And I also think it's one of those books that, while I don't think it will have a profound impact on your life like some of the ones that we do, I think it is still a really good one to read and listen to, because anytime that it changes your way of thinking or your perception of how things should be or how you do things, I think is can be really, really impactful, even though it's just like learning from your mistakes, which people know. But I think this is just it's a really cool way to look at different ways to look at how and why you should learn from your mistakes and how others have done so. And just there's a couple of good quotes that I found as well, and it says, learn from the mistakes from others. You can't live long enough to make them all yourself," was one that I liked. Let's see, I think I have some others, but yeah, I think there's just how the mindset shift, I think, is one of the biggest things of black box thinking that I really liked.
Yeah. So I really did like the book too, mainly for a lot of the reasons you're talking about is how he covered the information. He had a lot of great points and just examined these different industries. One thing he talks about is bloodletting, how that was just like bloodletting was a thing for like 1700 years or however long it was, that was just like all the way through history. We're like, oh, if you're sick, we definitely need to like cut you open and let a little blood out. We now know that to be absolutely ridiculous, right? But that was just what they thought was the case. They didn't need to test whether or not it was useful or factual. They just did that. And that's crazy. That's a long time to continue to make a mistake. I do think as technology has advanced and society has advanced, I think we go through that cycle a little bit faster of like finding out mistakes. The scientific process has sped up quite a bit, but it's still nowhere close to perfect, because he talks about the difference in what you talked about, the aviation versus medical world. So in aviation, like you talk at nauseum of like what you're about to do. And to be honest, I'm going to say it's aviation, but I'm going to say it's military, like in general, especially any kind of combat related role in the military. There's going to be a pre-briefing, intel, everything that you're going over, what you're going to do, who's doing what. There's a lot of information to cover. This is just aviation, military in general. There's the execution of that thing, and then there is the post-mortem, the debrief, like what happened in aviation world and like the Air Force specifically. Like debriefs can last hours and hours, especially if a lot of mistakes were made or things that need to be talked about or things that need to be learned. And that process really helps the military improve and make fewer mistakes. And it's just kind of a mindset. I think I have that mindset just from having a military background. Is there's always this like, okay, we did it, but how can we do better? Like what didn't go well, and going over those things. And I guess in the medical community, I'm not a part of it. This is something that he mentioned. There's a lot more like hierarchy. I'm the doctor. Don't you dare say I made a mistake. And if they did make a mistake, they kind of sweep it under the rug as like a one off, because there's no way that they are fallible. And like, there just seems like there's a ton of ego involved in the medical space and hierarchy between like a nurse not wanting to tell a doctor what to do. And it's unfortunate because the stats he gave of like how your chances of like running into like a medical error or mistake versus like dying in a plane crash or something like that is just insane, like absolutely insane. And I hope that we can do something about that, because yeah, I can see that happening quite a bit. And I think one of the only solutions is not only the mindset of maybe the medical community changing, but also the introduction and use of like artificial intelligence to like help doctors make better decisions without having to always just rely on checklists in their head. Um, so yeah, some of my takeaways other than that, uh, hire coaches and consultants. This is kind of my takeaway from it, because like Joe said, you don't have the time to make all the mistakes yourself. And that's like the reason I say consultants is because you like maybe in business, you need a consultant, and fitness, you need a coach, and people who've already made these mistakes, you want to learn from them, make the mistakes shorten that learning curve, make fewer mistakes, and see progress faster. That's why people hire coaches. That's why people hire business consultants, is to be able to achieve a result faster, because learning it all on your own is absolutely possible. It's just always the longest, hardest way. And so you can speed that up by basically paying for it. You can pay somebody to learn from their mistakes. I would say also, if you realize that you make a mistake or it's repetitive, you need to create some sort of system or process. We do this a lot in our business, like on the back end. If there's something that seems to keep happening and it's a problem, either for a customer or internal problem, we're going to create either an automated system that's going to take care of that, or it's going to be a process, like an if this then that, like if this happens then you do this. So it takes your brain out of it and you kind of know what to do. um I think the biggest thing is eliminating excuses, which they kind of talk about in the book in their own way towards the end, is like that. I think that's the biggest thing, is like making excuses for a failure, and it kind of lets you off the hook. And I'll give a very tiny example. So Graham, my middle child, loves soccer, very good at soccer. He's on a very good soccer team. He's been playing since he was 3, and he's soon to be 8. And up until a few weeks ago, he had never lost a soccer game. Never once had he ever lost a soccer game. And I mean, that's a fall season, a spring season, and summer tournaments for almost 5 years. And so that's a lot of games. It's not like, oh yeah, like he did 10 games. Like his personal record, it has to be like 101 and 1. Like it's crazy. And I'm not saying that to brag about him. I think the team is really good that he's on, and just like really squared away, and they have good coaches. But they lost a few weeks ago. But it was very interesting because there was like rain or something that kind of like washed us out one day. So we came back the next day. Things were different. The league was very unorganized, and they didn't have the proper goals for these kids, like their age group. Because like the bigger the kids get, the bigger the goals get, until eventually you're at like a regulation size goal. And theirs is like in the middle. It's not one of those tiny kid goals, but it's not like the biggest one, because that would be like a 2-minute run from end to end, So anyway, they use the tiny little kid goals that are used for like 3 or 4-year-olds for 7 and 8-year-old soccer, which is quite a bit different. Like I would say like a third of the size of the other goals. And so they're these tiny goals. The game looks hilarious, like, because it's a relatively large field with these tiny goals. It's almost like you're playing a different game. And this is the game that he lost. And he was super upset about it, because he does like some crazy like cross shot kicks, and a lot of other kids on his team do this, and they would miss the goal by like 2 feet, like would have easily been in there, and they probably missed 10 of these. But the other team, they adjusted their strategy, they got closer, and they would just kind of like get as close as they could, then score the goal. Our team never adjusted their strategy. They just played how they've always played. And so they lost the game like 2-0 or something. And I say all that to say, because when it was over, Graham was 100% focused on the goal size. He was like, that goal is like, he's like, that's not fair. Like, it's not fair. And I was like, well, it actually was perfectly fair, because you both had the same goal. If you didn't have that size goal, then it would be unfair. But it was fair because both teams had to play under the same parameters. Now, I'm a lot harder on him than I am in reality. In reality, I'm like, WTF soccer league, like they may have actually won that game if you guys had the right goal sizes. But I wouldn't let him focus on this excuse that kind of let him off the hook for not making the adjustment, because I don't allow my kids to do that. And so I know that's a long-winded example, but we do that a lot, I think, in our lives on a much smaller scale. Like when a mistake happens, or, we don't get our way at work or something, in life, we make up these excuses that are more along the lines of, yeah, I didn't succeed here, but it's because of X, Y, and Z. And there's always this excuse or reason And I think you have to completely get away from those things. Like they are not helpful. And that was my explanation to Graham, was like, dude, I get it. Like legitimately that could have been the reason you lost, but there's always going to be something like that come up in sports. Like you should have eaten more food and you're tired during the game. Like that you can't be, well, if I would have had that Gatorade, I probably would have won the game. You can't start that cascading effect of excuses that lead to you not meeting the desired outcome. And so I think we have to be very aware of that as adults, not doing that. Not doing that in your career, not doing that in your family, never really making those excuses, always taking that ownership and just trying to learn from your mistakes and being like, okay, I know maybe it wasn't perfect. There were different conditions than I am accustomed to, but how could I have adjusted and won the game, and or done this thing differently? And I think that that's a really great thing to do, because if you were to just look at your life on a daily basis and you get to the end of your day and you just said, okay, how did today go on a scale of 1 to 10? And there's no, it's your own parameters. You're like, whether it was a good day or bad day, it's completely subjective, right? You're like, today was a 7. And then you're like, okay, I rated a 7 out of 10. What cost you those 3 points? What prevented today from being a 10? And then you can answer that. This is like the quickest thing that you can do. And you can even do it in your head. Like when you're laying in bed before the day's over, you're like, okay, scale 1 to 10, what was today? And if you're like, today was a 7, and you're like, okay, well, what could have made it a 10? And you're like, well, I, I was like super busy. I was running from one thing to the next. I got a lot of stuff done, but it just felt super hectic, which made me feel stressed out. You're like, okay, plan your calendar better for the next day. You kind of failed that day, so you just, and now you have a solution, right? You've kind of done a quick debrief on why that day wasn't as good as you think that it could have been, and now you have a solution for the next day. Be like, okay, tomorrow I'm not going to do that. Let's spread these events out. Let's have some break time so I can actually like eat lunch or breakfast or whatever. Those kind of things. I think that goes a long way in like just these quick personal like check-ins of how things went. So anyway, these are just kind of my takeaways from the book. I think the book was really good. They even get into fixed and growth mindset a little bit, which I think we've talked about on the podcast a good amount over the years. So definitely something to always be adopting. That growth mindset is important. But yeah, I think that's about it. Do you have anything else?
Yeah. Going back to the military thing, it's kind of funny because I thought of my first thought when I was going through this about the military was on the bad side of it. But I think the military gets both sides of the points he's going through, because on the processes side, I know you know more about aviation, but I worked in maintenance for a while, and in maintenance, if they have all kinds of instruction and like everything is broken down like as simple as possible, you're told what to do. If anything goes wrong, or if any small little mishap, if you're driving a forklift and you hit something with a forklift, it could be complete 100% human error. But they will send an entire team to come and look at why this happened. They will interview anybody that was on site, you and everybody else that was on site, about why this particular thing happened. They will look at the entire process about how it could change, you could avoid doing this. I think they might have action plans every time this happens, so that it might end up being like some object was moved 2 feet so that it wouldn't happen again, even if it was 100% human error. So there are parts in the military that they do that to avoid all of these mistakes and mishaps. But then on the other side, when they were talking about, it was we're talking about surgeons, and then like people who don't budge when they're wrong and won't correct mistakes. Like when people get higher up, and to the more important they are, the more of a authority figure they are, the less likely they're going to be to admit that they're wrong, admit their mistakes. And that happens a lot in the military as well, because once people get in charge to a certain positions, they don't want to budge. Like it's at that point, it just becomes their authority, and then how they see things. They don't want to show a certain amount of weakness. And that was also interesting because I as he was explaining it, I thought my first thought was like military and certain people in authority positions, that like it's just their way, they're going to do it. It doesn't matter if they're wrong or not. That's just they're in charge. So that's just an eye-opening thing about how, if you are in one of those positions, that you need to be open to I don't know if criticism is the right way, but open to knowing that you're not infallible, that you have, um, you've made mistakes. And like, just even think about in the past of people that you've worked for that have made mistakes, and now you're in that position of, okay, well, I need to foster upward communication and thinking. And this actually makes me reminds me of another book that I always loved, Better, Faster, Smarter, or Smarter, Faster, Better, something like that. It's the kind of like the sequel book to The Power of or the Habit. Was it The Power of Habit? Something like that. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But they went over this. It was like a car manufacturing company. There was like GMC or some car manufacturing company in the US that had all kinds of errors and wastes, and like money was going down, and they just had all kinds of problems, and like the processes were being messed up, things were being damaged. And they brought in consultants from Toyota, and one of the main things that they did for that was that they the company with all the issues, they could not address any of the issues or communicate to upper management that, like, hey, I'm here every day, we need to fix this, we need to fix this because this is what I'm doing. But because the people on top thought they knew best because they were on top, but they wouldn't listen to whoever was on bottom, or lower down the chain. But one thing that Toyota was doing was that they had this system in place to where you could bring up any of these things. They had that upper communication, so that, and then would trust that, okay, I don't know this as well as you do, so we'll take your word for it and change this in the process. So thinking of that is another just really good point that he made about how you can stay ahead of mistakes as well.
Yeah, and that's a lot of like culture based. Like, even to be honest, I think he romanticized the aviation world a little bit too much. Like they are infallible and they're perfect at looking at mistakes, but everything you're talking about is still 100% a problem. And there's like a hierarchy in military. Like, you can get in a debrief, and then if let's just use like rank, I'll just say a lower ranking person kind of calls out a higher ranking person for something that happened when they were flying the sortie, the higher ranking person might like take it in the brief, but then they would probably pull you aside and talk to you after and be like, watch your fucking mouth, you know.
Yeah.
Pardon my language, is like flashbacks, but that kind of stuff would happen. And so I don't think that the aviation industry or anything in the military should get this complete pass, because there's 100% that kind of stuff that goes on. And I think that's in every industry. There's the boss. Nobody wants to tell the boss that he's wrong. And then when you do tell the boss that you're wrong, like I've had instances of that, not even in aviation, just where, you tell, you could be like a captain or a first lieutenant, and a colonel made a mistake, and like you're telling them you have to do that at the appropriate time, just so we're all clear. Like, you can't call them out in front of like 30 people. I do think that something aviation, I feel like, is different, but if it's a different field, that's just bad news. Because if you embarrass them, they're gonna get all mad and flustered. But anyway, I've even told them in private, and they still get incredibly pissed off because you're just lower ranking. And so I'm saying all this because if you are that higher ranking person, like, learn how to take feedback a little bit better. Like, you are gonna make mistakes. There's like an ongoing joke that red flag. So red flag is like this training in Las Vegas that fighter pilots go to generally before they deploy. I think a lot of people know about red flag, but the most dangerous thing at red flag are the lieutenant colonels and the colonels who are hopping in the jets, because they're just older dudes who aren't flying as much as some of the younger dudes, and their hand-eye coordination, reaction times are not as good as they once were, but they have this like mentality like they're the best, right? And really, they're just the most dangerous people out there because of, the proficiency has gone down or whatever the case is. So just all things to keep in mind. I know we're kind of like circling here. I just thought it was a good book. It opens up a lot of like conversations for embracing failure and being okay with that. Like, I'm generally okay with feedback from anybody about anything on how I could improve. Because I just don't really think I'm like an expert in anything. I think that's what keeps you good at your job, is never truly thinking that you're the know-it-all expert to all things. Being willing to change your mind, accept feedback from people. I think those things are very important. So good book. I think it covers a lot of great things. You want to get to a rating?
Yep.
What would you rate it?
I think I want to say a 4. I don't want to do a 4 1/4, so I'll say a 4.
No fractional plates. All right.
No.
Yeah, I will go with a 4 as well. So let's, like I was talking about, what kept it from a 5? What kept you from giving it a 5?
Well, like I said, it's just one of those books where it's one point. There's one thing, and it's just that is really driven hard into you, which is it's good and it's presented well. It's not one of those where it's like after a while, it's like, okay, yeah, we get it. Same old kind of repetitiveness. So it was framed well, it was presented well, but it was still like learn from your mistakes, be able to take criticism. Like that was it. I just boiled it down.
That's it. That's the book. I feel like if you have that, let's just say nailed down in your life, like you learn from your mistakes, you take feedback, and be very honest with yourself. Like look at the past couple of weeks and see if that's true. And so, yeah, if you are already in that camp, you could probably skip this book. And so what kept it for me from hitting a 5 out of 5 is kind of that same thing. It really is just that one point, like embrace failure, be able to take criticism, and you kind of get that right off the bat. But the book is so well written, maybe I would even give it a 4.5. Like it was very interesting, like all the points that he went over, how he covered that. So I think the best use of this book beyond reading it and learning that would be gifting it, maybe. Like if you do feel like members of your team
not like somebody you think makes a lot of mistakes. don't be that passive aggressive.
Yeah, no, I think just like if you feel like this is like a culture you want to instill, like I don't know, in your family, friends, mentors, like whatever, whoever your circle is, it could be a good book to like read together to just make sure that you're kind of all on the same page. But yeah, I think it was really solid.
Yeah, anybody in sort of whether it's management or any sort of figure that you think you can have inspire some changes in what you do in the business you're in or whatever, then I think it'd be good.
Yeah. All right, man, let's get to the workout. What do we
this is a 25-minute lunge test. Anytime there's a bunch of lunges, it's just like, oof.
You can always do another lunge.
Yeah. And I'll just say this before we get into it, because not only a good friend of mine asked me about this, but somebody in the Facebook group recently, since it's beginning, it is better weather. People are doing more outdoor things, whether it's a lot of hiking, a lot of trail runs. I know specifically the person in the Facebook group said they were going to getting prepared for a 4-day hike. And if you want to do any of those Spartan races where there's going to be a lot of hill, a lot of ups and downs, lunges is a great way to prepare for these things because it's running is, straight on. Lunges and like step ups, your hips are varying a whole lot more when you're doing it. Maybe not as much with lunges, but still that unilateral movement will help prepare for these types of events. So the 25-minute lunge test is you're going to start with a vest, with wearing a weighted vest or backpack up to 20 pounds. And part 1, you will lunge for 400 meters as fast as possible, capping yourself at 25 minutes. If you finish the 400 meters, rest until 25 minutes is up and then continue to part 2. If you don't finish the 25 minutes, then you just go right into part 2. So basically, if you finish, you get to rest. If you don't finish, then you're not resting. And then part 2 is take off the weighted vest and then do 400-meter lunges again. So you're doing a half mile of lunges. The first one is with a weighted vest or backpack, and then a 25-minute cap to whether you finish or just continue on to the next one, or you actually get to rest. Brutal.
Do you know how long it takes you to do a 1/4 mile of lunges?
I know my range. I know my fastest time. I probably average around 12 minutes.
Yeah.
That's unweighted. I've gotten it. One time I've done it sub 10, which was just crazy. But yeah, not vested. I think when I did it vested before, because I was doing this, I think it was closer to 13, 14, yeah, maybe like a little bit long, 13, 14.
Yeah. So it's a generous, like time. So most people will get rest. I know there is a vest involved, and so it could slow you down, but That's typically, I think, what I'm seeing would be like a 10 to 15 minute range for athletes who train regularly. Sub 10 is crazy. Sub 10 with a vest on is crazy. Um, that's really fast. But yeah, I think 10 to 15 is what you should
And
be shooting for.
there is not a cap on the second one. So the first one, you should try and have some urgency, especially if you want to get that rest in. And then the second one, you just complete it. A nice
Yeah.
cool down.
Yeah. It's a solid one. All right. Any tips for this one?
I actually do have one that's new, and it's kind of I guess I just do this on my own thinking, and that is somewhat like do your lunges to like a metronome. So a lot of times when you start off lunging, it feels good, but until it doesn't, and then you're just gonna hit a wall, and you're gonna stand and shake your legs and not go anymore. But my key whenever I do these is to never stop moving, and that is to stay at a moderate pace from the beginning. And I don't go hot out the gate and just start lunging fast, because it's normal for you to just start lunging fast. Once that buildup happens in your legs, it's going to be hard to keep to go more. So do it to like a manageable tempo that you can do. It's going to be hard to like figure your pace for it, but typically I do a lunge, maybe like a pause, like a second pause, like lunge pause, um, or just a slower stepping gait through. But either way, I try and keep that same um, pace throughout. So start off a little bit lower intensity than you might, and just try and keep that throughout.
Yeah. So this is a lot of lunges. I do think the goal should be to like go continuous, like without stopping, like Joe said. But the tempo matters. So yeah, you're not just trying to go as fast as you can. Find a good pace in which you can kind of just keep moving. And then only stop if you feel like your legs are like about to like blow up, and you'll know, and they might. And so you probably should take a break, rest, shake out your legs a little bit. But you're also like, I think you'll be amazed that you can just, like I said when we just started, like you can always do another lunge. Like it doesn't matter how bad your leg hurts or your legs hurt, you can always do like one more lunge and stand up. And then I think if you get to that point where you're like, I can't do another lunge, do another lunge and just see how many more you can do. And that feeling might even go away. It might even be like, well, I guess I can just keep lunging, and you'll be amazed. I think once people kind of break through that wall sometimes, that pain wall, they realize that they can handle a lot more than they thought. And that's kind of the point behind workouts like this. It's not like to game or to like track a PR. It's to push yourself, meet yourself a little bit, and see who you are internally with that internal chatter. Other tips, because it is so much volume, uh, just pay attention to your lunge form. I don't think that there's necessarily like a perfect lunge form. I think there's just lunges that don't hurt. And I don't mean don't hurt your muscles, but if you're doing something and your knees going a certain way, or you're going too far forward or not enough forward, there's so many things that can go wrong in a lunge because each person is different. Mechanics are different based off how tall you are. So there's not a perfect, like, your shin needs to be perfectly vertical every time. I mean, that's not necessarily true, because if you're like 6'4", that might not even be possible, And so, all that to say, you should know the difference between good pain and bad pain. Your muscles filling with blood and getting uncomfortable, that's okay. That's a burn. That's not normally a bad pain. It might cause you to stop or rest, but it's not on the verge of injury type pain. But if you're feeling something weird in your knee or your ankles, like because your form's a little bit off, don't compound that over hundreds of reps. Like make an adjustment to where that pain goes away. And that's one thing I would just really like for athletes to think about if you do this one, especially if you've never done this many lunges, is don't just think, yeah, my knee's really hurting, but I'm meeting myself right now. Like that's not what I mean. Okay. Don't don't push through the pain if it's a bad pain. And if you're not sure if it's a bad pain or a good pain, then just pretend like it's a bad pain. Let's just go with that and make some adjustments, take the rest, and make it to where it doesn't hurt that way anymore. Because you don't want to get injured doing too many lunges. But it's relatively safe. It just sucks.
Yeah. No hands on your knees or your legs to push yourself up, and make sure your knee that going down is preferably touching the ground, but within like 2 inches of the ground when you get that full range of motion.
Yeah, I love to do this workout like on a football field if I can, because or I will wear those like really thick
Yeah, concrete sucks.
knee thing. Yeah, because most of the time I'm doing lunges in my driveway or up and down my like street, and you got to wear something on your knees. Like
Yeah.
I might even buy knee pads for something like this, because I'm just using like those neoprene sleeves, which are
Hmm.
okay. They help, but it also like slows me down because I'm trying to like I don't want to
Yeah,
slam
you want
my
to be
knee into the
gingerly.
ground, so it's like a little bit more of an eccentric contraction because I'm like touch and
Yeah,
then get back up and do the next one. So
you just have to measure on the football field. I remember when
yeah.
I did. We had this is just a story from last year when I was in Bahrain. We had quarter mile lunges for I programmed it for strength, and um, it was we had a huge overhang, awesome gym. It was all like rubber mats, and I wanted to do all these lunges. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do it here instead of out because the gravel outside just outside of that was is basically gravel. Just like I would just beat up my knees. Like, okay, I'm just going to do laps around this large gym space, and then hope my watch registers it. Well, because I didn't leave much of a confined space, my Garmin didn't calculate it correctly, and
Yeah.
yeah, and I think I ended up because I was like, okay, well, I after I went back because I'm pretty sure I did way more because I was like, okay, my time was like 16 minutes for what it said. I heard way worse than I thought it would, and I calculated. I actually counted um my steps for an entire lap and how many laps I did, and I did like 600 meters that day because I just the location was off because I didn't leave that actual pad, so the Garmin couldn't really calculate it correctly. So that sucked.
Yeah, I definitely have. I don't remember exactly what happened. I remember it was when I lived in my first Texas house, is maybe when I first published this workout, and I kind of wanted to like take my brain out of it. I was like, all I want to think about is lunging. And then I think I used like map my run or something, and I set the distance at 800 meters accidentally instead of 400. And so I was just like lunging, and then you get into this like you start to think somewhere along the line, I think I did something wrong. Like I think like you start to think like maybe I set the distance wrong, or like this is way further than
Yeah,
I thought. I had those thoughts probably at the appropriate time, but I viewed it as mental weakness, refused to check my phone, and kept going. Because if I would have like checked my phone and it had been like, what, you're 200 meters into 400 meters, like, what's your problem? I would have been pissed off. But I tried to be too mentally tough, and I think I did like 800 meters, just which is the whole workout on the way out. And then I was like, well, okay, should I do more? So yeah, definitely I've made lunge mistakes. So I don't even really trust GPS on lunges anymore. I normally just like know where that turnaround point
yeah.
is,
Have
and
your
I do
quarter mile
that.
distance
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah. One last tip there. All right. Well, I think that's it for this one. If you're one of our Garage Gym athletes, really appreciate you, sticking around, hitting the training up, listening to the podcast. Just some updates for everybody. If you are listening to the podcast, one thing that could really help us out is if you just take a few minutes to leave that 5-star review and positive comment. It really does help the show out. It pushes it to more people, helps whatever the algorithms are out there in the world that we don't even really know about. We just know it helps. And so if you want more people to learn about Garage Gym Athlete in the podcast without sharing it with your friends, you can literally just leave a 5-star review and positive comment. But we also would really appreciate it if you actually shared this podcast with your friends. One of the best ways for a podcast to continue to grow is word of mouth. So if you want to share it with your friends, families on Instagram, Facebook, email it out, whatever you got, we would really appreciate that. Anyone who's not a member of the training, definitely go check us out. Go to garagegymathlete.com. You could sign up for a 14-day free trial. And then the last update I have is just YouTube. We are publishing a bunch of new stuff on YouTube. Joe is actually working really hard on publishing all sorts of formats, different types of content, and it's been a big focus for him and will continue to be. So if you do want to get involved in the YouTube side of what we're doing, there will be some exclusive content that's not coming to the podcast and only going to YouTube in the near future. So go check us out. We are Garage Gym Athlete on YouTube. But that's it for this podcast, guys. Remember, if you don't kill comfort, comfort will kill you. Gym Athlete Podcast. If you want to learn more, go to garagegymathlete.com. You can learn about our training, Let us send you a copy of our book, The Garage Gym Athlete, or you can even get featured on the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. Thanks for listening.